You are listening to audio from University Baptist Church in Beaver Creek, Ohio. Our mission is to make wholehearted followers of Christ who know him and make him known. Please enjoy this podcast and visit us at ubcbeavercreek.com for more information.
All right, welcome in to UBC Talking Points. Our purpose is to make wholehearted followers of Jesus Christ who know him and make him known through ministry and theology conversations. I'm Phil Wing, serving as the host and facilitator for this Year in Review episode. Every year in December, we take some time to look back over the last year, reflect on what God has done, and we wanted to do a special episode of this podcast highlighting a few of our ministry areas and leaders just to talk about what God has done in 2024. So we've got Bryson Jackson, we've got Bobbie Schell, we've got Bill Letcher, we've got Jason Wing. So just to start off, in 30 seconds or so, what was kind of one of your favorite ministry moments from 2024?
My favorite was during camp. We've had a relationship with a girl who has been coming to camp with us for a few years. She's really struggled with her identity, feeling loved. And one night during the message, it was talking about the wrong messages, like the lies that you believe about yourself. And so we stayed after that teaching and had a conversation with her. And at that point, Greg Baker, who both of us were meeting with her, looked at her and was like, "Are you ready to give Jesus a try?" And she's like, "Yeah." So it was one of my favorite moments.
Right on. That's awesome.
Who else? I just want to know who Grog Baker is.
Can I see Grog?
Highlander Grog Baker?
Greg Baker.
I mean, it's hard to put everything, like a whole year's worth of ministry, into a memory, right? One thing. I'll say for me, one thing that was a sweet part of 2024 was being able to take my sabbatical this year and have that time with my family. But what stands out to me was just the realization while we were gone that, like, our church in no way is totally dependent upon me, right? Our staff, our leadership, our church body was able to function in a strong, flourishing way while I was away. And that was a relief and a joy for me. I would say that's one thing. And then I would say one memory that we talk about all the time this year that is a fun one is the week when I asked Bill to preach on the Nephilim. And he preaches on the Nephilim. And on that day, like an older lady in our church named Rosie gives her life to Christ. So preach on the Nephilim, see people saved. That's pretty cool. That's a good one for me anyways.
Yeah. What about you guys?
I'd say for me, I'm a people person, want to connect with everybody. And we've put some things in place for the Connections Ministry to be able to welcome people in, new people, all those processes. And so just a few months ago, we had a lot of people register for UBC 101. We put them in. We meet in A101, the connection room. And we pre-registered, we had plenty of room. Well, 12 additional people show up. And so we had 40 people in the connection room. It was packed, it was awesome. And so it's just neat for me to be able to see new people coming. We have processes in place and in ways to, again, connect them so that ultimately that they meet Jesus and know him.
Mm-hmm. That's a lot of people in that classroom.
Yeah, that is a lot of people.
Steaming up the windows.
Truth.
What about you, Bryson?
There were two really meaningful baptisms for me this year. And one of my first serving opportunities at UBC before I was on staff, I was serving as a prayer team member during the brand new sermon series in 23. And Ben and Betty's grandson, Levi, comes back and I got to lead him to Christ. And that was even before I was, serving in groups ministry here. Well, so this year he decided that he wanted to be baptized, and it was really meaningful and special when he specifically asked me to participate in that baptism moment. And it was crazy because there were a lot of people that thought that he was one of my nephews or somebody here who was family, and that was a meaningful moment, and reflecting on that was really cool. And then my actual nephew also being a part of his baptism was a really meaningful moment this year, as I think as well, just about discipleship and what the Lord's doing with some of our young men. So,
yeah, and those are a handful of really great examples of some of the stuff the Lord did this past year. He We have a bunch, from the great events to big ministry efforts. A lot of our ministries really grew like crazy this year. But, throughout the year in 2024, we had a theme, that kind of came back over and over, this multiply theme. Multiply the gospel, multiply disciples, multiply leaders, and multiply churches. So just kind of getting into that theme, what are some of the ways that we have seen UBC be involved in multiplying the gospel this year?
I'll go ahead and kick us off with this one. It was really amazing for Skylar and I to go on our first UBC mission trip with Jim Corbin. And so the three of us were in a nation in Southeast Asia, and it was really powerful to participate in intentional discipleship in a really lost nation. And there was one individual who received the gospel for the first time that I distinctly remember. And it was really cool to be able to lead this young brother to Christ, and seeing him surrender his life to the Lord. Had a family, his entire village was Muslim, and there was no one around him who believed in Christ. And to see this brother make the decision to surrender his life to Jesus for the first time, knowing what he was going home to, and making some specific decisions. We got a message then a few months later seeing that he had been baptized with the believers after we had left. So it was really cool to see in a mission context, seeing the gospel go forward and some pretty powerful impact. So it was, really neat.
I think the fall overhaul, which is funny to talk about multiplying, but we were multiplying space by doing the fall overhaul. And what that was on in August, we moved to 3 services. And then in addition to that, we moved our Awana ministry to the afternoon and our student ministry to the evening, so that those 2 ministries could utilize the space in the whole building because we needed it. They were kind of like packed like sardines. And because of that, we were able to offer more space for our small groups for student ministry. But not only that, like Awana, we had just come off a stint where we were like, sorry, you can't invite friends. And that was really hard for our leaders, David Kaufman and Melody Ortiz, our Awana directors. And they had a passion for wanting to be able to reach the community and have our Awana clubbers invite people. And so because of the fall overhaul and moving our time, while it being tough on some families, it has allowed us the opportunity to reach more people.
I think for me, one of the things that I'm in charge of is the membership process. And some people have said it's really difficult to become a member, or like it's very thorough to become a member here at UBC, the requirements. And it's true. And one of the things that I get to do is to read testimony after testimony of people's faith in Christ. And that's super encouraging for me. And I think it's because of the processes we have. And the membership class, like there's multiple times that someone gets a chance to share their faith verbally, but then also when we write them down and put them into the member meeting notes and things like that. So being able to, helping people to be able to articulate their own story is super powerful. And it's a way that, again, the gospel is multiplied out because multiple people hear that story over and over again. And it's just really encouraging for me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm thinking about, like, when it comes to multiplying the gospel, I'm thinking about the ways that it happens, like kind of personally and programmatically. So from a programmatic standpoint, like one thing that comes to mind from this past year is launching the What is Salvation class. And to see the people that have gone through that. Like I remember, I wasn't participating in the class, but I heard afterwards about a guy who had been raised in a cult and was driving by our church one day and just saw the cars and the vibrancy in the parking lot and just thought, well, I guess I'll go check out this church. And then he came in and heard about the What is Salvation class and then attended that and was comparing like what we were teaching about the gospel to what he was raised believing. Like to me, I'm like, all right, that is a class we offer where the gospel's been multiplied. And then of course there's like personal stories about people sharing the gospel that we hear throughout the year with members of our church. I think about people like Haley Gammy, who's on staff with us, like talking about one of her friends who she's been talking with the gospel and like just hearing her heart on how those conversations have occurred and how they've been sweet for her. And so I think, we're going to see it that way ongoing. There's going to be the programmatic side of getting the gospel out. There's going to be the personal evangelism side as well.
Yeah. We've had a number of evangelism opportunities that honestly pertain a lot to teenagers. So speak a little bit about some of those evangelism opportunities that were pretty unique to some of our local high schools and students like that.
So I kind of want to jump in on this one right away, unless we're supposed to go in this little order. Okay. So like thinking back on this, when it comes to students, I am really happy that Rob Slougman took our kids to Utah to do a mission trip this past summer. I think I had 2 of my own kids go. We had obviously I think maybe 10 or 12 students from the student ministry go, something like that. And I just thought that was really courageous, because we're not sending a group of kids to simply do a construction project or to simply lead a VBS, which those things are good and important, and I'm not downplaying those. But this was an intentional trip to go to a place predominantly Latter-day Saints, right? And to put our students out into the parks and the local communities to share the gospel. Now, that was the first time really that I remember that evangelistic of a push kind of happening within our student ministry since I've been here. So I thought that was a really good trip. And my kids, when they got off the trip, they came back, they got off the airplane, they got in the car, and it was Gideon, my son, my daughter Reagan, and a girl from our student ministry named Tessa also with us. And man, the whole ride home from the airport to our house, we just talked about the stories of sharing the gospel and how it not only impacted the people, but it impacted our kids. Their faith becomes more solidified and strengthened, and they're excited with a new and fresh zeal for the gospel. So that really stands out to me as far as student ministry and stuff goes. I thought that was a great part of this past year.
Well, prior to that too, I love that we had a couple in our church who had experience out there investing in our kids and getting them prepped and trained for how to share the gospel out there. So they had a personal connection with other church members, helping them prepare.
Yeah. So
Great.
the couple you're talking about, at least one of them was raised Mormon, right? And then converted and then to Christianity, right? And trusted Christ. And now he goes back and trains some of our students before they go out to Salt Lake City. I thought that was awesome. So cool. Yeah. All right. So I'll just keep going on the youth and family stuff, if that's all right. When I think about where the gospel is going forward in our church, you guys can comment on this, especially you, Bobbie, you've been more involved. But I think about the FCA community. I think it's pretty great that, what's FCA? Oh, Fellowship of Christian Athletes. I thought that was pretty cool that the Beaver Creek schools opened the doors for that ministry to start. And then this year to hear you and Rob talk about what's happening there has been encouraging to me. So I don't know if you want to comment on FCA ministry at all of you.
Yeah, so we were approached. There's an organization called Fellowship Christian Athletes, and there is a local missionary, Todd Pickthorne, and he approached us to help support the ministry there. And so Rob and I agreed. And so we meet every Thursday morning at 7:30 a.m. with high school students. We have about 50 students who are attending that. I think the most exciting part about that is we do have some UBC students that are there, and watching them have some leadership opportunities there has been really exciting. But not only that, we are equipping the students to share their testimony with each other. And it's really cool to see how bold they are with their faith in a public school. And so we've been there about 3 years, and it's been exciting. We have about 50 students now. And then in addition, we were like, well, my goodness, we need to be in the middle school. We have several middle school students. We wanted them to be connected with other believers, but not only that, to experience the same boldness of sharing their faith. And so we have a person who attends our church who's also a teacher. She is our advisor, and we started the FCA at Coy Middle School, and we have several students involved there.
Very awesome. You got 50 high school students coming at 7:30 in the morning. And how early do those middle school students get there?
Right. Now, we say after school for the middle school.
Okay.
Because they go to school really stinking early.
Big kudos to the parents on both sides.
Right.
Also we've got the FCA stuff, but also think about how the Young Life community in our area has been influential as well. I think over this past year, we've probably had 5 or 6 Young Life leaders. We're talking about people in their 20s, right? who were baptized at our church. And here they are, young life leaders, leading this high school age ministry in various schools. And so when they come and get baptized at our church, obviously what we ask them to do is to share their testimony of salvation. And in their baptisms, they've rounded up all these high school kids who come to church with them that day. And the gospel is going forward through the testimony of I'm thinking of people like Noah Turner and Lauren Markham, who, she's now Lauren Turner, so they got married this year. But like Kevon Lane and the Kleinfelders, like people like that, where, and it's just awesome to see their testimonies going forward that way, and to see high school kids are impacted. Plus, you've had some high school opportunities this year, Bryson.
Yeah, it's been cool to see how, when we were praying about entrance points into the Huber Heights community for church planting, that the Lord really opened up doors for us with the Huber Heights football team. So out of the blue, that random call from Jeff Smith, I didn't know at the time. We were praying about where we needed to go and what community to invest in. And that was just like, the Lord, here you go. Opportunity to multiply the gospel in the new community that you guys are praying through. And that was amazing. And it's been cool to have those conversations, with a lot of these, students that are thinking through their faith, and honestly having open conversations about ways that they can grow and start thinking through things. And really the need to see that disciple making movements begin in that community has been cool. And then seeing that go from the football team then to the basketball team now, and then seeing my wife and Sophie Walther doing it with the women's basketball team here at the end of the year has just been really cool, and definitely bodes well for a lot of neat things that the Lord is going to do in 2025 in that community. I'll also say, though, it has been cool on the college student level to see a lot of Wright State students coming to our Wednesday night group. And so there's definitely been a key push with some of our regular Wright State students who've been coming to UBC, who've been highly evangelistic and going after a lot of their friends over at Wright State, and seeing the Wednesday night group growing specifically with Wright State students, and seeing that really meeting a need for community with some of those college students is really encouraging.
Yeah, that Wednesday night group you're talking about, that's our Wednesday college age ministry, college nights, Bible study. It's been going on.
Yeah, and honestly, like thinking just over this year, right? Like that started this year. So it's been, UBC has always had a heartbeat and a drive to minister to college students in various ways, but specifically this year, that Wednesday night rhythm has been a neat thing for some of our students to find regular community and study in the Word, and that's been awesome.
Yeah, I love that. So between our colleges and our local schools and all that stuff, obviously God's given us a lot of open door there, along with all the ministry efforts that we've talked about already that are even within house, in UBC. What are a couple ways that we're really hopeful that UBC could grow in terms of that gospel multiplication? What are some of those ways that we really believe UBC could grow in this going forward in future years?
I mean, I could start. I am really excited for the gospel multiplication work in Huber Heights next year. And so even as we think about multiplying churches, right, obviously that's number 4 on the list, but the gospel has to be multiplied first. And so as we're praying through and thinking about neighborhood engagement and community engagement and the ground game, so to speak, next year, I'm really excited for those who are going with us, but even just for UBC as a whole, right? Like we're all doing this. There's definitely going to be a team that's going to go, but we're doing this collectively as a church. And so for us as a church collectively to engage that new community and to really see the gospel multiplied in a new space, it's exciting to see the growth opportunities that are there, and excited to see us take on some new challenges next year.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, when I think about this aspect of our ministry, multiplying the gospel, if I think of like one area where I'm burdened for our church to grow, I think this is it. And the more I reflect on that, I think the reason why I'm feeling that way is probably just because of my own life, where like I want to grow in personal evangelism. I feel like so much of our life is wrapped up in doing stuff with church people, It's like, I know you guys make fun of me all the time for going to like the CrossFit gym and stuff like that with Reagan this past year. But one of the things I loved about that was just being around regular people, right? It wasn't church people all the time. I mean, there's some believers that are there and it's wonderful. But for me, I just think for me, an area to grow is just to lead by personal example in regards to sharing the gospel with people that I know that are lost, and praying and asking the Lord to open doors for me personally to share the gospel with people who are lost. And I think that's, at least for me, that's an area of growth that I hope, would eventually, kind of disseminate from leadership out to the rest of the body.
Well, right on. I mean, in terms of multiplying the gospel, we move from there to talking through multiplying disciples. So what are some of the ways that you're seeing that happen across our church right now? Multiplying disciples across UBC. How are we seeing that right now?
All right. So I think that's a good question. And I know there's difference of opinions on this, but one thing I just kind of want to level set right from the start is that as the years have gone by, 20 years in ministry now, I really do believe that almost everything we do is discipleship. Now, some people will adamantly disagree with that, and they'll say, well, if everything is discipleship, then nothing is discipleship. And I would say, I hear that sentiment, and we do need to be intentional with our disciple making. But I am convinced now that it is a part of people's discipleship to come and hear the Word of God taught in UKids ministry. It is part of people's discipleship to be in a growth group or a care group where biblical principles are being reinforced, discussed, prayed over in a group. When people come to a Sunday service, they hear the preaching of God's Word. They engage in worship, in the vibrant kind of corporate worship life in our church. That's part of everybody's discipleship. Discipleship, I think, again, there is a kind of a personal disciple-making aspect of it that needs to be there for us, for sure, and I hope that we grow in that. But I do think in answering this question, right from the start, I guess I just want to say, let's not discount the disciple-making that happens outside of the one-on-one mentoring in the regular rhythms of church life. So what was your question? Where do we see disciples being made in our church right now? I mean, as silly as it sounds, I'm like, well, basically everything we do is part of it, at least. I'm sure you guys have more comments and specifics to add to that and places where you're encouraged. But I am encouraged by the holistic approach to discipleship in our church.
I'm super encouraged by my team lead, Julie Bixel and Greg Baker, being intentional about who the small group leaders are. And not only that, it's an intentional thing to get our middle school and our high school students trained to be small group leaders. And, I think part of that becomes the sticky faith for high school students. If they're able to serve and make an impact, I do think it makes a long-term impact for them. They learn how to be disciples of other people, and they're equipped and they know that they have the giftings and the skills to do it. And so I'm really excited about that. Greg Baker has been super passionate about it. He recruits like crazy. I'm sure numerous people who listen to this can be like, yeah, he's talked to my kids about that. And that's been one of my favorite things. But
that's the truth. Greg Baker is all over the teaching aspect of discipleship. He's making an impact on our kids. But I love seeing him rope in the high schoolers to come serve in, the 4th and 5th grade ministry. And he's basically helping these high school age kids get used to kind of leading small groups and engaging personally. I love that about what's happening.
Well, and I also want to mention Kelsey Dobney and her passion for worship. She, we started the UKids Live. We're able to do that because of our building and our chapel. And she has started a UKids motions team, and that's 4th through 6th graders. And y'all, if you get a chance to come to the chapel and watch these students lead others in motions for singing, it's so beautiful. And for the children to see their peers excited about worshiping God, it's really fun.
I think another way that we're making disciples here, multiplying disciples, is through groups ministry, also through the mentoring that's taken place with the men's ministry, the women's ministry, the micro groups that have been started. That's key. A lot of our ministries, small group leaders, things like that, many times that's a public or a highly visible kind of thing. But I'm excited also about all the things that take place behind the scenes. The three of us get a chance to do pre-marriage counseling, pre-marriage mentoring. And, those are, long sessions, and you're getting into the nitty gritty of things, trying to prepare couples, for a really important decision that they're about to make. And that's discipleship. And I love how you said it, where everything we do is discipleship. And so from the mentoring men's and women's ministries, but also down to things like this, with helping couples prepare for marriage and following up with them as well. That's a discipleship. And that's where those relational things are made, those relational connections with people are made. We've done a few weddings since we've been here, and ones in the past as well. And these are the couples that, come back to us and say, catch up with us in a few years, or maybe 10 years down the road, you officiated our wedding. Here's how we're doing. And we can continue to speak into those lives because we built those relationships with them. That's part of discipleship as well. That's part that kind of gets me excited about things around here.
When I think of discipleship in our church, I specifically think of spaces and places where spiritual development is taking place in individuals' lives. And, I look at even just, I know we're going to talk about leaders here shortly, but I just think of like record amounts of deacons serving and, working with people and pouring into people. I think of, our new elders in our church this year and those places where those are ways in which they are turning around and discipling other people. And I think of all of the groups ministry. We have a record number of groups. We have like 31 growth groups right now, which is awesome, and never enough room in any of them as well. And so, those moments where people are connecting and then growing. And then also we've had a number of groups this year multiply, which has been really cool. And then thinking about specifically like this year doing our Sharpen Men's Conference, you got your shirt on there, repping the brand. The Sharpen Men's Conference in the spring was really dynamic and cool, and specifically zeroing in on how men can be connected together. And then, seeing what the women did with the Image Bearer Conference. So with both of those conferences this year, and then kind of the outflow of that intentional discipleship taking place in those spaces has been really dynamic. So we've seen our men's microgroups launching, where there's 4 or 5 of those that have taken off right now. That's really encouraging. We have like 170 women that are engaged in Women's Bible Fellowship on Monday nights and Wednesday morning. But man, it's been so cool to see our women's ministry team with Alicia and Rachel and others who've been involved in the teaching ministry specifically, who have zeroed in on saying like, we want our women to be in the Word of God. And so it's been Exodus and it's been Hebrews, and it's just like, man, like they're killing it. So it's really cool to see discipleship taking place in all of these different spaces in really dynamic ways.
I know that you guys probably wouldn't say this because you are staff members, but I would say one thing when it comes to discipleship that I praise the Lord for is the fact that when it comes to personal disciple making, I just see our staff leading by example. I remember having a conversation with you, Phil, at one point about like, hey, who you're involved with discipling right now? And like, you had like somebody on your list for like every day of the week. It was like, I'm like, Phil's an everyday discipler. Like, it was awesome. Like, legitimately, that made me really happy. I think about like Bryson, you meet with Gideon and Phil's son Silas like Sunday mornings, 7 a.m. early. These guys are coming in early, right? 2 teenage boys, you're discipling. Bill, one day I was on a discipleship walk with a guy from church. We walked from our church down to Chick-fil-A. We walked into Chick-fil-A at like, 7:30 in the morning or something like that. You were sitting there waiting to meet a guy that you were involved with for discipleship. I think about like Slothman's wife, Tiffany. She takes my daughter Reagan out to Panera, right? And they are doing personal discipleship with each other. I think about Sandy Corbin, right? Like she's meeting with Hannah Mitchell and lots of other people. For that, like Jim Corbin. How many people has Jim Corbin discipled in our church? A lot, right? And I think, what did I hear? Like now he's got like 25 guys or something signed up for his daily study through the book of Romans or something like that, So I don't know. I just wanted to say publicly that I praise the Lord for the way our staff leads by example.
So on that topic of the mentorship, personal disciple making, are there any other kind of direct examples that you guys are seeing that you really want to call out?
Early on, my time here, I reached out to a number of different young adult guys, and we didn't have the microgroup thing established yet, but I kind of had a desire to see some of those things take place. And I just reached out to a number of guys. It was Caleb Parsons, and it was Philip Gammy, and Cole Hunt, and Tim O'Donnell, and Josh Anemi, and some of those guys. And just said, hey, like, let's, you guys want to get in the Word, let's do something on Saturday morning. And it was really cool because now a year later, I remember just Cole opening up and just sharing, because he since has become a member and got more involved in serving and working with student ministry and stuff like that. And he just told me, he was like, man, this has just been like a really key transition period for me in my spiritual growth. And seeing, obviously, with marriage and big life transitions there for them. But I think of those specific stories of individuals who can sometimes be on the fringe, right, in various ways, but then to say when they wind up engaging in those meaningful relationships, to see how the Lord just brings that growth in people's lives, it's just really sweet.
Mm-hmm. I've had the privilege of being on the sideline of Michelle Crum, my coworker, colleague, investing in my daughter, Emma. And Emma felt comfortable after her being within each of them having interactions as student ministry, and Emma reaching out to her and started meeting with her weekly.
I want to highlight Bobbie. I have watched you over the past year and a half or so super intentionally invest in Kelsey when she was an intern, and now we hired her on to be on staff as well. And I've also watched the way that you've done that with Haley, another young lady on our staff, and just intentionally invest in them in that just tender, just sort of way of just loving them with the love of Jesus. And I'll walk through the lobby and I'll see you meeting with Haley, or I'll go by your office and you're in there talking to Kelsey. That's discipleship. And even though the whole world may not see it, even though a lot of people are going to hear about it, keep doing it. So thanks for doing that. That really makes a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The personal stories that stand out, we are connected to our kids, right? And so when we see it happening with Gideon asks me on Saturday night, Dad, what time are we getting up to go to church for Bryson ship? That's what he calls it. And so I love that. But he attaches his discipleship with an older man investing his life. I love that. Phil, I know that some of the guys you've been involved with are very personal, right? And I don't know if you want to comment on any of your own story there, but I just know that you've been so involved. But I think the story that stands out to me the most from this year, I think it's been going on for a while, but it stood out to me this year, is Sandy Corbin and Hannah Mitchell. And just seeing all the physical struggles that Hannah has gone through, and to see Sandy just take this, personal care side with Hannah, to the point where now, when they talk about each other, they refer to each other as a spiritual mom and a spiritual daughter. And it's it really is sweet to see how the Lord has developed that discipleship relationship with them.
And I'll also just throw in here really quick as well, because I know we're moving on here, but it's cool as well just to see the culture of our church just does this. People are just doing this on a regular basis. And right, like we try to lead by example with the staff, and we talk about these things, but man, I just see, Josh Ortiz comes in and meets with Joe Atkinson, a Wright State student, and, they just, they're doing that. Or I think of Connor Tate meeting with Stephen Eggleston, or, it's just like there are all of these individuals in our church who just do it. They just do the work, and they recognize this is our call as a church, as a people, right? Discipleship is not just for leaders to do, it's for Christians to do. So I think that's really cool to see carrying out through our church.
We've highlighted a bunch of these stories. It's awesome. There's a lot of names. A lot of those names are recognizable to UBC, whether it's our staff members, our deacons, our elders, whatever. The truth is that kind of story is happening with a lot of names that people don't know either. It's happening, like you called out, it's happening with a lot of people in our church. I watched my daughter become a discipler for the first time ever this year when one of her friends came to Christ. And those are just there's examples like that happening around the church where people are just stepping up because they see hey, that's a person who needs to walk with Christ, then I want to help, And so it's been awesome to see that. We're going to take a break in just a minute, but I do want to just ask, we just a little while ago, we unleashed this idea of the discipleship pathways that are coming at UBC. How do we foresee multiplying disciples really growing, changing? How do we really see that happening going forward with discipleship pathways?
Yeah, so discipleship pathways, as we announced, are basically our intentional plan to meet people right where they're at and help them follow Jesus, right? We want to create pathways for people to do that. And so we are developing 5 pathways, right, where people discover what it means to follow Jesus. And then they connect to the church of Christ and be able to follow him in the church. Then they form as disciples of Jesus. Eventually, then they get to the 4th pathway of leading people toward Jesus. And then the 5th path is launching out for the kingdom of Christ. And so those are our 5 pathways. Now, when I think about that, things that are going to change, I just think the most obvious is we're just going to have specific paths for people to go. If people are coming here and they're like, I'm a seeker. I'm not even a believer yet, but I'm curious. Okay, we have a discover pathway for you that we want you to be part of that will help you come to know Christ. If you are a person who's like, I'm a follower of Christ. I've never been trained on how to disciple anybody else, but I want to. Okay, the lead pathway is going to be, part of that is going to be geared towards you and helping you lead another person toward Jesus. If you're a person who's got a call in your life to plant a church or to go to the mission field, a lot of times churches, they celebrate that the Lord calls those people, but they don't have tracks or pathways to prepare people to go. And I'm excited that we can not just outsource that to seminaries, we may partner with seminaries, but we want to be a church that it has an intentional path for people who have that call in their life. So I see some of those things as being programmatic, intentional changes for what may be involved when we launch discipleship pathways robustly here in 2025.
I think the word there is intentionality. And to say that the discipleship pathways, vision, and things that we're wanting to implement, it doesn't change anything that we've just talked about. Right? It doesn't change the fact that we're all called to intentionally help others spiritually grow. But it does help us have a lens and a framework of how to be intentional with people where they are. And so I do think that really is the key to that, because I've had some people, since we've talked about discipleship pathways, ask questions. What does this mean? And how are we tackling this? And things like that. And I think it's important to remind people to say, ultimately, this doesn't mean that we're changing the mission, but we're being intentional with the way that we're tackling it, unified as a church. Because it's a lot easier to do things organically when you're in a small church context. But specifically, as our church continues to grow, we have to be intentional to have structure and ways that we're trying to tackle things in unity.
Right. What's our purpose statement? Helping people become wholehearted followers of Jesus Christ. Okay. How are we going to help people become? You're talking about it. You're hitting the nail on the head. It's discipleship pathways is the intentional pathways by which we can help people become wholehearted followers of Christ. And that's going to be available for both the curious seeker, the new believer, as well as the mature follower of Christ, and those who are being called and want to mobilize to the mission field, and everyone in between.
So it's both programmatic, but it's also intentionally personal. And I look forward to seeing, maybe when we do this year in review at the end of 2025, hearing more about how that really got to put some meat on the bones. I think that'll be great. Right now, we're going to go ahead and take a break, and we'll be right back. All right, well, welcome back in. We have been talking about our year in review, looking at 2024 and the things God has been doing. We focused our conversation in on this multiply theme. We already talked about multiplying the gospel. We talked about multiplying disciples. Let's dive into the conversation about multiplying leaders. So what are some of the ways that we have seen development of leaders really happen over this past year?
Well, I'm going to jump right in and talk about our deacon ministry. God's blessed UBC with 30 deacons who care for and pray for the members of our church. And coming on board and being able to work with this group of men is just a neat and exciting thing of seeing really how the gospel goes out, but also how leaders are developed We have young men in their 20s that are on this. We have seasoned men up in their 50s and 60s who are also serving and caring for. We changed this year a little bit because our deacon body grew. So we made cohorts, which are 6 different groups of these men. So not only does a man who's a deacon have the resources of the staff and the elders, but also 3 or 4 other men who are part of just their small cohort. And it's neat to see how they all connect with each other, draw upon each other for resources, for prayer. And it's really neat to see, again, how these leaders are being developed. And I'm excited to see how God's going to bring additional deacons this coming year to, again, help care for and pray for the members of our church as we make disciples.
Yeah, right on. I appreciated this year how Jeremy Kimball, Scott Dixon working alongside him to some extent, but mainly Jeremy built really a more formalized internship program for us to start utilizing here at the church. Bobbie is obviously going to be starting to implement that in 2025, but the groundwork, the pieces, some of the ministry philosophy behind that, the steps that need to be taken behind the scenes in order to essentially identify and then develop these leaders. I think Jeremy has done a great job of helping build that framework that Bobbie can put into action this upcoming year.
I've been really thankful for Kevin Bowman being with us this year and his intentional work with us as a staff. And it's been really great to see, the way that he has tried to bring the team together and serve and the unique character that he is at our church. It's been neat. So it's been cool to kind of reflect on his investment in us as leaders, and grateful for him.
And I agree totally with Kevin being a help to us. I think we already mentioned discipleship pathways, but I think just the kind of development of the framework for that in and of itself is kind of starting to put into place a structure for us to develop leaders, one of which is going to be the development of new elders within our church. And I think looking back this past year, one thing that we've done with our elders that we really hadn't done in a formal way before is this year we've identified like key essential trainings that need to be in place once an elder starts. And so points of learning, points of understanding in the scope of our ministry, policies, procedures, various things that kind of are intentionally developing those who are new to the elder body, because the Lord brought us, 5 new elders this year, and getting us cohesively operating as a larger group has been sometimes a challenging but a fun part of our development together as well.
We've seen some new classes as well that have been good development for leaders. I think of the gospel-centered teaching class that was offered fall quarter, and it's been cool just to see the rising interest in classes ministry as well. And I think of even what John Heading is doing right now in winter quarter, his biblical leadership class. And so it's been cool to see individuals stepping forward within our church who right now even are on staff who are passionate about raising up leaders from within. And so seeing that kind of happen and start to take place this year has been really encouraging to see.
So we're talking about highlighting, in a sense, some of those who are doing the training and the developing of leaders, but who are some of those leaders who have, kind of been the fruit of that? They're starting to lead now, whether it's a new thing in their life or just new here at UBC. Who are some of those leaders that come to mind when you think of people being trained and developed and being put into leadership?
I've got a long list I could roll on this one, but I'll let some of the other guys talk for a minute.
I mentioned most of them previously. So I think about the way that Greg Baker and Julie Bixel are doing. I also think about Mike Sleiby. And when I think about Mike, and I'm not sure if people know that he stepped into a role that we were kind of missing with our U Buddies. For those who don't know, our U Buddies is our special needs ministry where we do one-on-one with those kids who just need a little bit of extra support. And there was a gap there for me. And he stepped into that to help us but to implement some things that we saw for the needs of our kids. Not only just being one-on-one, but also helping us recruit for people to have their own buddies.
So U Buddies, right, is providing adults basically to come alongside families with special needs, kids with special needs.
Yes.
So I was at a basketball game a few weeks ago and met a guy who I'd never met before. He's been coming to our church for a few months. And I said, hey, what drew you into our church? What brought you back? He specifically said U Buddies. And that the church was able to serve their special needs child that way, which I thought was really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
I think of a couple others. So we talked about college ministry already. The Lord has raised up some key leaders in that. So even just about a month ago, Steve Harrell has committed to being team lead for college ministry moving forward with transitions with my staff role. But obviously Steve and Melissa stepped in this fall, and then also Dan and Kim Mance stepped in to start helping with the Wednesday night college group. And that was really awesome to see older adults in our church having an intentional desire and aspiration to pour into college students.
Let me just comment on that.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned Dan and Kim Mintz. Like, I remember when Dan and Kim started coming to our church. I want to say this was 2018 or 2019. And they had just come off a long stint of ministry elsewhere and were a little bit nervous about getting back involved in church ministry again, whether it was singing on the worship team or getting involved in any way. And I love now that Dan Mance is like helping you lead college ministry. I mean, the Lord has really brought him and Kim and not just that, but also during a year that has been especially challenging for their family. So yeah, I agree. It's been cool to see Dan and Kim step in.
Yeah. I think as well about a lot of leaders who have stepped up within men's and women's ministry. Obviously, Jeremy transitioned from doing work with the internship, then started serving as men's ministry team lead. And he's been great at casting vision and really rallying our men regularly, which has been really great. But then thinking about all of the different women who have stepped up to lead in women's ministry, I think of when Kelsey Flynn started doing a lot of the communication stuff with women's ministry, how much of a game changer that was, even just with a lot of the regular ins and outs of things that she's been able to bring to the table organizationally. And think of Elisa Penny, who got involved with like volunteer coordination with women's ministry. Rachel, starting to teach regularly with women's ministry. So those have been some really key leaders in that space that have stepped up this year in some really, really dynamic ways.
We had Melody Ortiz step in too as a co-leader with David Kaufman, and she's done such an excellent job of communicating the intention behind Awana. Her and Dave together have both been so good about bringing the Awana leaders, of helping them be intentional with the clubbers. It's been fun to see.
I love the clear vision in Awana this year for disciple making the Word of God. I mean, it's always been there, but it has just become even more crystallized and precise this year with the Awana kids. It's been great.
Some of the new people that I get to connect with because of all the different environments that we have, a couple that come to mind. One is Todd Penny, who faithfully comes in the weekend that we have baptisms and make sure our baptism tank is filled. I call him, he's on the tank team, people who just help get this thing prepared because nobody wants to get baptized in freezing cold water. And so he makes sure that all that's ready to go. So I'm thankful for him. Some of the other new people that have come along have been, military families who have come in recently. But there was a great need because of our growing Sunday morning attendance. When we have communion, that's a project to get all that together and all the logistics. And so God laid it on my heart to ask some people to be part of a communion setup team. And these people come in usually on Saturday. They make sure that all of the trays are filled up. They'll put them in the fridge, make sure we've got all the bread and everything like that. Everything's ready to go for that. And then not only do they serve by setting up, after the last service, they come in afterwards and wash up all the trays and put everything away and get it all reset for the next time. And I'm just super thankful that, again, God's been leading a lot of new people here who are willing to step up and say, yeah, I'm part of this church. Most of them are part of the membership process and becoming members, but just they're like, this is a way that we can serve and we're ready to go. I'm super grateful for that.
I want to just give a quick little bullet point list. Ready? Just some people I jotted down in this one. I think about guys like Spencer Reynolds and Isaiah Estep, who are young men in our church in their 20s, who sense God's call on their life to pursue ministry. And they've stepped kind of, they've stepped into church ministry life. They're not just kind of academically learning about ministry now in seminary. They are stepping into ministry leadership in children's ministry and in small groups for our student ministry. And I love seeing young guys like that step into the work they're doing. I think I'm thankful for other people like Jeremiah Carsey and Corey Thomas. Corey Thomas was one of the first ministry interns that ever served with me, like when I first started in ministry almost 20 years ago. Right. And so now to see Jeremiah Carsey as the chairman of our deacons, and then Corey step up to serve as, what do we call him, vice chairman or assistant chairman, whatever it is, like, that's cool. Speaking of chairman, I joke around about this all the time, but Bob Pickle has led the chair ministry in our church for a while, right? Which is a bigger process than most people understand, getting all these chairs set up and tore down. But then to see Mike Murphy step in and kind of a new guy taking some leadership in a ministry that almost nobody really knows about, right? I think that's awesome to see. I think about people like Carl Bromer and Adam Euseus leading the men's group that's, pursuing sexual purity, and that is wonderful to see. I think about Matt and Jen Moy starting to step into caring for military families that are either new to our area, or we have families with folks that are in deployment, and to see Matt and Jen start to step up towards leading that has been cool. I think about, we've already mentioned her before, but Kelsey Dobney stepping in. One thing I remember about Kelsey was, like, she steps in to lead the U Kids like singing motions team. And then one Sunday she's like, I don't know how I feel about these song lyrics. And so she messaged you, right, Phil, and was like, should we sing these song lyrics or something like that? And my point in that is just that she's thinking not just about doing the singing or the motions, but she's considering what the content is that our kids are being taught, which I think is cool. My list could go on and on. Scott and Deidre stepping in to lead the divorce care ministry that is reaching people in our community. Jackson Ewing, I saw him this past year, like, complete his missions internship with us, and then step into serving in Awana this year and discipling kids. I see you have tears in your eyes. Are you doing?
I love these names.
Oh, really?
I love these people.
I'm like, oh no, did I say something wrong? Yeah, praise the Lord. I mean, there's all sorts of other people I could keep going, but we're going to run out of time, so I'll just wrap it up.
Well, some of those key leadership things that have stepped up this year lead us right into our last conversation, which is just this topic of multiplying churches. And we've seen an intentional investment in that this year, specifically pertaining to Bryson and Skylar Jackson, who are jumping in to help us start this church plant effort for us. So as we think about what God has done over this past year to help us multiply churches, let's get into that conversation. Let's talk a little bit about how that has come to be.
I think of here we're using the Multiply sermon series kind of as a grid for our discussion. I think of that sermon series. I think of a conversation that we had with some of our leaders in our church, with Jeremy Westbrook at the end of January, about church planting. I remember Jeremiah Carsey coming out to me afterwards. He was like, all right, so Bryson, when are you going to plant your church? and I honestly, like, had just kind of continued to be putting that off a little bit, and, early in marriage and things like that. But it was really cool to see how, as Jason and I started having conversations early this year about it, and how the Lord unified our hearts and unified my wife's heart with mine as well on those things. And then seeing how the Lord has just brought a lot of the pieces together this year over time has just been really sweet and rewarding. But yeah, I reflect over this last year and just see a lot has happened to get us to where we are now. That's like, wow, how did that happen? It's like a whirlwind.
Yeah, I mean, I've shared this in other settings, but I think church planting in general has been on my heart for a long time, like 15 years, maybe more than that. And so, to see that the Lord has now unified our church staff, leadership, and elders toward church planting, like, that was all in the works before we ever announced any official church plant, right? So to see that the Lord brought unity and then brought the the person in Bryson and his wife, Skylar, and to see the place now that he's put on their hearts to say, okay, we're thinking Huber Heights, and this is where the Lord's leading us. And I guess you asked about what the Lord's done there. I just think unity behind the scenes. He's brought us a person. He's given us a place. Now he's rallying people behind the vision, and it's sweet to see it start to happen.
I'll also add that it's been awesome to see how God has given us clear, tangible direction that's been so helpful. Because, right, you can think of all kinds of strategy. You can have conversations about things that you think might be smart, or maybe God might do this. But that's different than saying, like, there have been clear steps that the Lord has given us, right? We talked about during the Multiplying the Gospel section how Skylar and I had been praying, God, give us opportunities where we can share the gospel in Huber Heights if that's where you want us to go. Because we were trying to keep our hands open, right? Like, God, if you want us to move, if you want us to plant wherever, right? Like, I don't want to be so, clinging to something that I think strategically might make sense. But then God gave us clear pathways into serving in the school and with lost teenagers and families. And that was a direct answer to prayer that was very tangible and very clear. And even just the encouragement through the Send Network assessment that we had this year was really cool. For those that don't know, we operate with the Southern Baptist Convention, and there's a specific arm, a church planting arm of the SBC called Send Network, and we did a assessment retreat that there were a panel of church planters that essentially took us through steps, and it was really reassuring even to hear from outside objective wise individuals to say, we think that you're ready to do this. Like, that was really helpful, because we love UBC and feel like there are a lot of people here who are speaking into us, but sometimes you can be kind of blind in your own context. And so it's really helpful to have, okay, we had this outside organization that objectively assessed us and said, we think you're ready to go. All right, cool. Well, I guess we're going to try to get this thing done. So
yeah, that was a big step this past year. So Jason and Bryson, take like 1 minute and just give us hey, why are we doing this? Why have we been in this church planting, effort? Why are we doing this next year? Give us like 1 minute on why, and then a little bit about what the next steps are.
So for me, the why really is the same reason why we do everything we do as a church. We want to be a people that are about God's glory. And I want to see us, by God's grace, glorify Him by taking, if I could say it that way, new territory for the kingdom of God against the forces of Satan and darkness that are at work in our world. So we want to see God glorified that way. And establishing new churches, to me, is why are we doing it? It's really just the natural outflow of the process we've been talking about so far. When we multiply the gospel, that grows into disciples. Disciples grow into leaders. When you grow leaders, what's the natural outflow? Multiplication of churches. And so my prayer is that we're doing this, why? For the glory of God in a new place in our city that needs His gospel to see people's lives changed for the sake of Christ.
I think that's an important point to make, because people around UBC could say, well, practically speaking, we're just constantly running out of space, right? Build this new building, it's packed full. If we don't send some people out, what are we going to do? It could be very easy for our reasons for why to look just practical. But if you look over the years, I know we've invested in multiple other church plants that we have taken some time to do what we can to encourage and push those on. We have done everything we can to spread out and help ministry not be just centrally focused. And even in this church planting effort now, we've added services here at UBC Maine. We've done things because no matter what, God, for some reason, keeps sending people here. We're going to celebrate that. We're going to serve whoever He sends here. I think it's important for people to hear, again, just the why is not just simply like,
Well, we don't have room for people. The why is for God's glory. We want people in more parts of the city to know who Jesus is. Yeah, I mean, you guys could speak to it, whatever you want to say, but I would just say for me personally, asking God to make us a church planting church would be on my heart, whether we were chock full of space, like if we were chock full of attenders or if we were like half full. Like it would just be what I hope the Lord does regardless of the size and capacity of our church.
And even before you're hiring, like think about that. Like that was a big piece of the hiring is if you were willing, what did you think about church planning? And were you like-minded in that? And I think about the history of this church. It was originally a church plant, however many years ago. And it was a heart of the
Sent out, by the way, First Baptist of Huber Heights.
Isn't that great?
Was the sponsor church for University Baptist.
I love that. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's important to talk about the history, too, that this church has always had not always, but has had a heart of church planting.
When I think of the why, something the Lord has worked on in my heart this year is that this is not about me, and this is not even about UBC. Because it can be so tempting to zero in on like our church and what's going on here and all the things that we're facing. But God's glory and the work of the kingdom is so far greater than anything that we could imagine or think of or be aware of that's going on. And the church universally desperately needs more local representation in communities that are growing with people who do not know Jesus. This next generation specifically is so hungry for real truth and helpful realities from who the personal work of Jesus Christ is. In the sense that, and I say that because a lot of people are like, oh, well, there's a church on every corner still in our various communities. And it's like buildings, not people. Like actual gospel conversations happening in marketplaces and in community spaces is decreasing at phenomenal rates. And so why are we doing this? Well, because there are communities around us that desperately need gospel works. And because it stirs us out of our comfort zone to sharing the gospel, making disciples, right? What happens when we just come to UBC and it's full on a Sunday? We look around, we're like, man, look at what the Lord is doing. And our eyes are blind to the fact that there are literally still over 1 million people in the greater Dayton area that desperately need the gospel. And so we collectively sacrifice our own comfort in order to help those individuals hear and understand and receive and know Christ. Like that's the why. And if there's any other why in our motivations, Lord help us, right? Like God, remove those things from us. Like this can't be about our kingdom in any way, and He will not bless it. And so I've worked in conversations with people to try to continue to cast that vision, because my hope is that UBC North can be a church planting church, a church plant that plants churches, right? And that it wouldn't, just happen when, it becomes a, 1,500, 2,000 person church that all of a sudden then we decide we're going to plant churches. No, like I'm inviting people to come with us right now who want to plant other churches, because this isn't about anybody else's kingdom, but this is about God's kingdom. And so however we can do that, like that's what it means to enter into a greater vision than just this one church plant, right? Like I hope that all of our church knows that this is all of us and that we all are called to be about the business of seeing churches multiply. And it's not just those that will stand up in front of the congregation at some point next year and say, this is the crew that's going. But it is our entire church stepping into a new season of seeing churches multiply by His glory and His power.
Honestly, that's probably a great way for us to wrap up in general, because that statement that you just made about the plant that would pertain to UBC as a whole. And this whole conversation we had for the last hour that could pertain to that whole thing. Why? Because this whole last year, as we have looked back and reflected, we've tried to say, hey, how has the Lord used this church to know him deeper and to make him known? And we're so grateful that we've gotten to see all of that happen. We've gotten to see all that happen. We can't wait to see how that's going to happen in the future too. I feel like 2025 is going to have a whole giant list of its own stories, and that church plant being a big part of it, but so many more things as well. And so our hope is that for all things, as we look back and we reflect on 2024, we say, Lord, look what you have done for your glory. Look what you have done to help people know you and to make you known. And we've gotten to be a part of that. What a gift that has been to us as UBC. So, no, we're grateful for that. We'll go ahead and wrap it up there. Thank you guys so much for being a part of this conversation today. This has been a pleasure. I look forward to more of these in the future. Thanks for joining in with us, and we will catch you next time on the next episode of Talking Points.